My name is David Carter, and up until 3 months ago, my life was made of simple routines. I woke up at 6 a.m., had coffee on the back porch while watching the oak trees sway in the warm South Carolina breeze, and went to work at the auto repair shop I inherited from my father. Since I lost my wife, Claire, to cancer 6 years ago, it's just been me and Emily, my 22-year-old daughter. She's everything to me, smart, stubborn like her mother, and with a smile that lights up even the grayest of days. Emily moved to Columbia to study journalism, but she came back at the beginning of the year to work at the Charleston Chronicle. That's when she met Lucas Mitchell, 25 years old, blonde with green eyes that seemed to scan every detail of the room when he first walked into our home. He was an event manager, according to Emily, and had a smooth way of talking. That sounded rehearsed. I didn't like him, not right away. There was something about the way he greeted me, a handshake that was too firm, a smile that was too wide. But Emily was beaming, so I swallowed my discomfort. Until that dinner night. That Saturday began with the smell of chili wafting through the whole house, a scent that always took me back to the days when Claire would stay in the kitchen, watching me and laughing at my attempts to refine her recipe. "It's chili, David, not poison," she'd say, poking my shoulder with a wooden spoon. This time, though, the smell didn't bring comfort. It brought a pang of longing that turned into anxiety when Emily announced Lucas was coming for dinner. He showed up at 7:08 p.m. I remember because I glanced at the wall clock in the living room, the one Claire bought at an antique fair. He brought a bottle of red wine so expensive the label practically gleamed under the chandelier light. "For the chef," he said, handing it over with a nod that felt scripted. Emily smiled proudly, like that gesture was some kind of trophy. Dinner was tense. Lucas talked more than he ate, complimenting every little detail of the house. The Persian rug I inherited from my grandparents, the vinyl shelves I'd been adding to since I was 15, even the abstract painting Claire made during her art therapy phase. "You've got classic taste, David," he said, chewing the last word like it might be a double-edged compliment. But his eyes didn't linger on the decor. They locked onto the framed photo of Claire on the bookshelf, taken on our 10th wedding anniversary. She was in a blue dress, holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something I had said. Lucas stared at that picture so long Emily had to pull him back into the conversation. "The chili's great, Dad," she said, trying to cut the silence. "The secret's the chili pepper," I replied automatically, while Lucas sipped his wine and dabbed his lips with his napkin in a way that felt theatrical. When Emily got up to fetch dessert, an apple pie she made herself, Lucas leaned forward in his chair. His fingers tapped the armrest in an irregular rhythm that echoed in my skull. "You should get out more," he murmured, low enough so Emily couldn't hear from the kitchen. "A man like you must feel lonely." The laugh I let out came, louder than I intended. "I have Emily," I shot back, gripping my fork until my fingers hurt. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives while holding a knife and not bothering to hide the blade. "Not always," he said, keeping his voice as smooth as poisoned silk. At the time, I chalked it up to the arrogance of a young man trying to stake his claim. Maybe it was jealousy, I thought, or some pathetic attempt to prove himself superior to his girlfriend's father. But there was something in the way he said lonely, dragging the O like he was savoring the word, that made my neck heat up. Emily came back with the pie, and Lucas flipped the switch instantly. Back to being the charming boyfriend, complimenting the golden crust and telling a funny story about a crazy client who wanted a Star Wars-themed wedding. I pretended to laugh, but my stomach was in knots. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my house alone. It was a sweltering Tuesday, typical of a Charleston summer. Emily was at work at the Chronicle, and I was out back fixing the fence the night winds had knocked over. Sweat trickled down my back when I heard an engine rumble into the driveway. Lucas stepped out of the car with a relaxed smile, like he was a welcome guest. "David," he greeted, holding up a denim jacket. Emily left this in my car. The jacket was old, one she'd had since her teenage years. Why the hell didn't he just wait and give it to her? "Come in," I said, wiping my hands on my shirt. He walked in like he owned the place. Took his time in the living room, fingers grazing the covers of my vinyl records like a collector appraising rare items. He stopped at the bookshelf, pulled out a copy of On the Road, and flipped through a few pages. Jack Kerouac. Nostalgic, he commented, putting the book back in the wrong spot. Emily told me you barely talk about your younger days, he continued, stopping in front of the photo of Claire. My stomach clenched like I'd been punched. Not much to tell, I replied, crossing my arms. He turned slowly, his green eyes catching the late afternoon light streaming through the window. Charleston, 1998, he said, each word deliberate. The rusty anchor bar, an accident after closing. Someone died. The air left my lungs. It was like the ground opened up beneath me and I was falling back into that night. The smell of gasoline and stale beer, the shattered windshield glass, the screams that didn't come from me. How do you... I choked, my hands tingling. He pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of his blazer and placed it on the coffee table with a theatrical flourish. Inside were yellowed photocopies of an article from the Charleston Gazette. The headline hit me like a punch. Unidentified man hits pedestrian after leaving bar. Victim dies at the scene. The date, September 12th, 1998. I know it was you, he said, sitting on the couch like he was in a boardroom meeting. The bar owner back then was my uncle. He saw you running out. My legs trembled. That secret had been buried for 21 years. I was 28, drunk, scared, running from the scene like a coward. I was never caught. Not even Claire knew until years later, when a nightmare made me scream the truth in the middle of the night. She swore to take it to the grave. And she did. What do you want? I growled, my voice hoarse, like I'd swallowed glass. He crossed. His legs relaxed. I want you. For a second I thought I'd misheard. You're insane, I said, recoiling, disgusted. But he stood and stepped closer. The scent of his cologne, something sweet with vanilla and tobacco, invading my space. You don't have to decide now, he whispered, running his index finger along the edge of the envelope. But if you tell Emily, well, murderer is a heavy word for a girl who idolizes her father. Before I could react, he turned and walked out, leaving the envelope on the table like a ticking bomb. I stood there for minutes, maybe hours, until the hum of insects outside brought me back to reality. I opened the envelope again. There was more than just the article. A blurry photo of my old car, a red Ford Mustang, parked 2 blocks from the bar that night, and a handwritten note. Friday, 8 a.m. Breakfast at Harbor Bistro. Come alone. The signature was just an L, drawn with a wavy line, like the snake he was. The decision to investigate Lucas didn't come from a burst of courage, but from a moment of quiet desperation. After his visit, I spent the night staring at the envelope on the table, as if the photocopies might ignite on their own. Claire used to say secrets are like rotten seeds. The more you bury them, the more they spoil everything around them. The next morning, I called Hank. Hank Morrison wasn't your typical movie detective, a former cop fired for unprofessional conduct, a euphemism for beating a rapist during interrogation. He now worked as a private investigator, specializing in cases the police like to ignore. I found his number on a bulletin board at Charleston Diner, scribbled below an ad for guitar lessons. I need info on someone, I said when he answered with the raspy voice of a man who smoked 2 packs a day. Name and what you know. Replied without preamble. Lucas Mitchell, 25. Works as an event manager. I heard the sound of a pen scratching paper. Personal enemy or professional problem? Both. He let out a dry chuckle. 10 grand up front. Card or cash? 3 days later, we met on a bench by the Cooper River. Hank was short, stocky, with a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. He handed me a brown envelope. Your boy's a textbook predator, he spat, lighting a cigarette. In Atlanta, an ex-boyfriend filed extortion charges. Dropped them after getting threatened. At his last job, he harassed co-workers in exchange for keeping quiet about embezzlement. I flipped through the dossier. Photos of Lucas in bars. Phone records, even a report from a former boss describing him as manipulative and dangerous. He's been doing this for years, Hank went on. Targets people with secrets that could ruin them, controls them till he bleeds them dry. The river shimmered under the sun, but all I could see were the words on the paper. I wasn't the first. So what do I do now? I asked, more to myself than to him. Hank exhaled a cloud of smoke. If you want my opinion, take him down before he takes you. But you'll need proof, something that doesn't rely on your secret. That's when he suggested the recording. I bought the recorder at an electronics store downtown, a tiny device that fit inside the wrist compartment of my watch, the same one Claire gave me for our 5th anniversary. The plan was simple: set up a meeting with Lucas and get him to confess to the blackmail. I picked the rusty anchor not just for the irony, but because it was a place tied to my past, a place where Lucas would feel in control. The night of the meeting, the bar was nearly empty, just a tourist couple in the corner and an old man slumped at the counter. The smell of polished wood and stale beer dragged me straight back to that night in 1998, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, the sound of glass shattering, the headlights illuminating the body on the asphalt. I pressed the watch against my wrist, feeling the faint click of the recorder turning on. Lucas arrived 20 minutes late, wearing a white shirt that showed off his arms, a calculated move to look innocent. He sat across from me with the smile of a man who thought he'd already won. "Changed your mind?" he asked, signaling the waiter for a whiskey. "I just want to negotiate," I lied, adjusting my watch. "How do I know you won't talk, even if I give in?" He laughed, low, drawn out, like I'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Because I love Emily," he said, leaning closer. "And she'd never forgive you." I gripped my water glass tightly to hide the tremor in my hand. "Then why not just leave us alone?" He took a sip of whiskey, his eyes glinting under the bar's amber light. "Because it's fun," he whispered, his lips nearly brushing my ear. "Watching her hero squirm like a bug on a pin." I pressed the watch again, making sure every word was recorded. "If I go to the police," I started, but he cut me off. "You'll confess to manslaughter?" He smirked. "Good luck. They've got nothing, but I do." He pulled out a faded photo. My red Mustang, clearly visible, parked near the bar that night. "Your uncle really owned the rusty anchor?" I asked, trying to deflect. "Yeah. He died last year but left behind a diary. Detailed everything, including how you ran like a rat." The waiter brought the bill and Lucas paid with a $50 bill, leaving the change as a tip. "Think about the offer, David," he said, standing. "Friday, 8 a.m. Or Emily gets a very special birthday present." I watched him leave, my heart pounding like a war drum. The recorder on my wrist felt heavier than ever, but for the first time, I felt like I had a chance. September 15th dawned under a rust-colored sky, heavy clouds announcing rain. Emily was turning 22, and I had invited her to dinner at the Rusty Anchor. She found the choice odd. "It's a bar, Dad, not a restaurant," but agreed. I prepared everything meticulously, reserved the most secluded table, double-checked the watch recorder, and brought copies of Hank's dossier in a black folder. Lucas, of course, showed up uninvited, carrying a bouquet of red roses. "Thought we could celebrate together," he said, hugging Emily with an intimacy that made me clench my fists. The evening was torture. Lucas spun fake stories about celebrity clients and complimented Emily's dress like a politician on the campaign trail. I could barely eat, chewing each bite as if it were glass. When dessert arrived, a key lime pie Emily adored, I placed my phone on the table. "There's something I need to show you," I said, pressing play. Lucas's voice echoed, clear and venomous. "You, her hero, squirming like a bug on a pin." He went pale, his green eyes dilating like a cornered cat's. Emily looked at him, then at me, her face crumbling into disbelief. What is this?" she whispered, her hands shaking. "He's been blackmailing me," I explained, sliding the folder toward her with the court records from Atlanta and Hank's reports. "And I'm not the first. Lucas stood so fast his chair toppled with a crash. "That's a lie," he shouted, pointing at me. "He's making it up because he doesn't want me near you." Emily looked at me, silent tears streaming down. Her face. "And the accident, Dad? Is it true?" I took a deep breath, the air leaving me slowly, like it might be my last. "Yes." She covered her mouth with both hands, a muffled sob escaping through her fingers. Lucas took advantage of the moment to bolt toward the exit, but not before I whispered in his ear, "The police know everything, Lucas. Good luck." That night, as Emily locked herself in her room and I sat in the living room listening to the rain, I received a message from Hank. He was caught trying to flee to Alabama. The recording was enough. Emily didn't speak to me for 7 days. 7 days of leaving meals outside her door. 7 nights of sitting in the hallway, waiting for her to open it. Until one Tuesday night she appeared on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling like the oak leaves in the wind. "Because I was afraid," I said, my hands buried in my coat pockets. "Afraid of losing you," she cried then, a raw, guttural sob that folded her in half. I held her, breathing, in the shampoo she'd used since her teenage years, and she didn't pull away. "He manipulated me," she admitted, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "He said you were cold, that you kept secrets out of pride. He wanted me to move to Miami with him." 2 days later, Lucas was formally arrested for extortion and violating parole. Hank made sure the recording and prior victim testimonies were enough. As for my secret, Emily was unwavering. "You have to pay for this, Dad," she said, not with anger, but with a pain that cut deeper than any accusation. "Not for him, for yourself." The next morning, I went to the Charleston Police Department. The lead detective, a man in his 50s with deep shadows under his eyes, listened to my confession without interruption. When I finished, he sighed and closed his notebook. "The 1998 case was shelved due to lack of evidence," he said. "But your confession reopens it." I nodded, feeling a twisted kind of relief. For the first time in decades, I could breathe without the weight of that night pressing down on me. Now, as I write these words, Emily is in the kitchen making coffee. The trial is in 3 months, and my lawyer says I could face 5 to 10 years, but it doesn't matter. The scars are out in the open now, and Claire, somewhere beyond the veil, can finally rest. Lucas? I heard he struck a deal and fled to Mexico, but people like him always carry their own prisons.